Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I'm Kristen Smedley here with my partner in crime, Mary Fran Bontempo, and we have a super fun guest for you all today. Here's the thing. I'm going to address two different crowds in the listener group of Brilliantly Resilient. For all the smarty pants friends that like to have a street cred behind our guest, I'm going to tell you right now that Dr. Morissa holds a doctorate in literature from Drew University and has a master's in communication and is a best-selling author. Okay, cool stuff, right? But here's for the super fun crowd that loves all the crazy fun facts like I do. Not only has she been featured on Forbes, you guys, MTV. What? MTV. Dr. Morissa has been on MTV, and here's the greatest. I think this is the greatest fun fact of any guest we've had so far. Broke a Guinness World Record for creating the world's largest chain of bracelets. Ladies and gentlemen, my new best friend.
Buckle up, people.
Morissa Schwartz.
Where this is going.
Thank you. That was the greatest intro ever. Thank you. You really built me up there, though. Now I'm like, oh boy, we want to go downhill from here. I'm just going to be a disappointment at this point.
That's what everybody says after they read our bios out loud and we show up. They're like, what?
I know, right? No, that's so awesome. Okay, so I'm like, let's begin at the beginning. But it sounds to me that you may have had a few beginnings or restarts or switching gears throughout your career here. So let's try to take it way back. You are, or not way back. Let's start where you are right now. You are currently with a publishing company, a writing company. Clarify that for me. I forget.
So I own two companies. I own a book publishing company and I own a writing and marketing company. So, a company that writes SEO content and content that people use for the marketing services. And then we can like run their social media, their ads, all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right. So it is two. So I wasn't confused. So, and I know that when Mary Fran looked at your bio and all the stuff, all her little short hairs were standing up on her head because she's the wordy girl and loves all of the writing. Are you like Mary Fran that always loved writing and words? Was that kind of your thing?
Yeah. I trace it back to when I was a little kid. I could not go to sleep unless my father read to me, and I'm an only child and I've always been very spoiled. So he would read to me until I'd fall asleep. And I have always hated going to sleep. Even today, last night, I'm like talking to my dog. I'm like, I know it's 1 a.m., but I'm having too much fun watching my music videos. I don't want to go to sleep. Like, I've never been the type of person that wants to go to sleep. So my father would just read to me literally for hours until I fell asleep. And I would memorize the books. And I started changing up the books, like to kind of trick me, like, oh, you think that this is the Three Little Bears, but nope, it's actually, So I realized that, he's writing. Like, that was my first introduction to writing. And when he started doing that, that got me into wanting to make up stories and write stories. So I trace it all the way back to like toddler years.
Wow. That's interesting because my dad is a phenomenal storyteller, and he would always at night, we didn't really have much growing up, but man, he would make up these stories, and he had a series. And me and my 4 brothers could not wait to hear the next piece of the series. And to this day, like I always say, I dream of being at least a fraction of the storyteller that my dad was. But how interesting that you had a very similar influence.
Yeah. And my father, he's a math person. He owns floor covering stores with my mother. He's not like a writer or anything. It was just, I don't know, a bond that we always had.
Oh, it's cool.
This brings up immediately a point that I just love. We talk all the time about your brilliance having its roots in your childhood. And this is a very clear example of that. If you look back, people go, oh, I'm not brilliant. I don't know. There's always something. There's always something. And it very often goes back to something that you really, really loved as a child that just gave you a sense of joy. And whether you use it professionally or not, that's the beginning of your brilliance. And you brought that to fruition in your life.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
So you knew that you wanted to work with words and you love the storytelling and all that. So then, of course, that lands you to MTV.
Yeah, it's just like, in my marketing company, we do 360. And a lot of people don't get, how ads go with SEO, but the MTV and the world record actually go very well with everything that I do. So my first book that I wrote and published was in high school, and it was called A Career in Contest. It was all about entering contests and winning them, because that was my hobby in middle school and high school, just entering sweepstakes. Like, that was like my little part-time job. I would enter every sweepstakes. I won so many ridiculous things, from a big snowboard, and I've never snowboarded in my life. I wound up winning like 12 iPads. So I wrote a book about it, and that was my first book. I self-published it. But like getting on MTV, that was a singing competition show. So it was like their version of American Idol. And as a kid growing up with American Idol, I always dreamed of being on a show like that. So I got to be on there. They did the whole, you're going to Hollywood. And I got to go out and sing on it. And it was hosted by the guy who plays Aaron Samuels in Mean Girls, which was probably the best part for me, because that's like my favorite movie.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, you just went crazy, like the cool version of Nerd Alert, like, wow, all over the place, all this really cool stuff. Like, I'm listening to you saying that your hobby was entering contests, and I'm thinking, she's a real nerd. And then you're like, yes. And then I was on MTV and singing. I'm like, oh my God, she's so cool. Like, talk about having every piece of your personality covered. Wow.
That's a great point. What's funny? I never, like, the contests and sweepstakes, I know now that they are, but back in the day, like, I was always like a good kid, always tried not to get in trouble and stuff, but I did one thing, and my punishment was from my parents that I was not allowed to enter contests for a month.
Oh.
So, and that was torture for me. That was the worst. So then I had prizes coming in the mail, and the question was, do they let me open my prizes, or do I have to wait until the month is up? My parents are softy, so they let me open my prizes. But yeah.
Now I want to interview your parents, because I have got to hear what it was like with you growing up. This is so entertaining and just what I needed today. Okay, so you do this thing about enter. How did you come into knowing that you love to enter contests? Where did that come in?
My parents, again, they entered me in my first pageant, but not like the toddlers and tiara pageants. It was an Easter pageant, like a Easter bonnet kind of competition, when I was literally 1 year old. And then they enrolled me in dancing school that same year. So I'm a year old in tumbling class. And they started me competitive dancing when I was 3. So I grew up just with all these competitions. When we went on vacations, we went to the Poconos and competed in their bocce ball tournaments, their ping pong tournaments, just like every kind of game that we could find. And arcades, even today, I mean, like gaming, that's just what we do together. So I grew up in a very competitive household. It's our love language. It's what we find fun. So that was why, finding any kind of game that you could win a prize at, I was like, I'm in.
So
Wow.
I'm feeling that you have taken this kind of competition game winning thing, and this really translates super well into what your business is now, because this is about helping people win. You do marketing, and that is clearly like, how can I get people to win this marketing game?
That's totally true. That is such a great point. And it is true, because there are so many different variables that go in, like, for example, an ad. I mean, just so many different things that you could do to help them. The whole point of that game is, how little can we spend to get them the most money? Like, we just had a client, she sells natural supplements, and we wound up selling 100 of her product in 1 week, and she only paid like $400 to sell 100 products. Like, that is a ginormous win. So yes, you're right. It's like contests every single day.
Oh, wait, now I know we're going to be best friends forever, because you just said ginormous, and that
She says
is
ginormous
a top
all the
3
time.
word that I use all the time.
It's a
like
real word.
signature.
It was added to the dictionary like 5 years ago. It is a real word.
Ta-da!
Okay, so we kind of get how you had your found your roots and all of this kind of stuff. But when did you figure that this could be a career for you? Like did this feel like, did this start in college? Like, when we talk about this reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance, that many people find that they can reset after something because they have resilience within them, and they might need to figure out and discover it all. But the hard part for them most often is figuring out this brilliance piece and how it fits into life as an adult. It's one thing to say it had its roots in your childhood, but then making that leap into, okay, it made me happy then, how can I figure it into my life now? How did you figure it?
Yeah, I mean, it all happened like in such a beautiful way. So it went from me being in high school, and I wrote the book about contests. I self-published it. So I learned about the self-publishing process. And I also learned, shoot, I didn't sell very many books. I sold maybe to my teachers because I didn't market this thing. I didn't know what marketing was. I was a high school student. So that was my first kind of knowledge about, okay, I didn't sell many books because I didn't promote it. But I also, at that point, my mother read in one of her women's magazines about freelancing, and she showed it to me. And I said, wait a minute, I could avoid getting a job at the mall, like my friends who were doing that and miserable. I'm like, I could avoid that just by like playing around my computer and writing stuff for people and editing stuff. Let's do this. So I signed up for a freelance site. My first book that I edited was a children's horror book, where she hired me. She didn't know that I was 16 at the time. I just had my thing out there like, oh, I published this book. I'm a published author. I've written for a few magazines, and she hired me, and it went so well. And again, like she recommended me to a bunch of friends without knowing I was 16, recommended me to friends. And before I knew it, I had like an editing and writing business. And because it's a freelance site, that's followed me. So I still have that freelance account, and I still get business from it just because it's been there for like 10 years. So I went from that to then clients saying, hey, you can edit and write. Can you maybe do some social media for me? Can you optimize that article that you wrote so I could put on my website? And it just kept growing and growing into a business. And I'm going through college and my master's at that point, and everybody's telling me, oh, you're going to need to get a 9-to-5 job. And I actually even went for a few interviews because I thought, even though I had this successful online at that point, it was freelance writing turning into a little bit of marketing business and the book publishing company as well. I'm like, I'm probably gonna need to get a 9-to-5 because this won't be able to sustain itself. And then once I realized, wait a minute, actually it can. I've supported myself through these degrees so far. I can make this into a business. That's when I went just all in, hired a team. I now have 48 people who do work for me on the marketing end. I can write, but graphics are not my specialty. So I hired 4 graphic people who create graphics for our ads and all that, and just have kind of built it up. Mainly while I was a student. I only graduated, I got my doctorate in May. So it was mostly while in school, which was a lot. But luckily I had that team then to back me up.
Wow. I'm blown away by first of all, by everything about you, because I went the much more traditional Marsha Brady route. So that none of that spontaneity thing applied in my house. We just did not do that. But the thing that I keep hearing, and the thing that we kind of tell people over and over and over again when we talk about this reset and rise thing, is don't be married to outcomes. So you kind of embody that by not being married to what the traditional outcome probably was for a kid of your age. First of all, I mean, who writes a book and publishes it when they're 16 and then starts an editing business? So you weren't a prisoner of those conventional ideas of what you were supposed to be at that age.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's true. I appreciate it. It is true. It was, I went also, my high school, I went to, here's where things get even more, where you said before, Kristen, about how I kind of bounced around from, I guess, careers. My biggest bounce was I went to the Academy for Biomedical Sciences. So I went to a school, there were 32 people in my graduating class, and we were all poised to become medical doctors. But once I got really into this
is the girl who made the longest bracelet chain, right? I'm just trying to get all this in my head. Like, how does one you must have multiple personalities. This is amazing.
Yeah. So I graduated from the school, but once I published that book, that was when I decided, what, that's much more my passion than this biomedical science stuff. But it was, so I do have this like background in biomedical sciences. I spent 4 years of my life devoted to that. So there's always that in the back of my head, but it helps when somebody has like an ache or pain. I can be like, hey, my father had a pain in his ear. I'm like, I'm taking out the little ear inspector. I'm like, I literally just did that. I think you have a punctured eardrum, Dad. You might want to get that checked.
This is fantastic. You know what I love? I love that you have followed your, we were just interviewing somebody about intuition. And you have followed your intuition about your brilliance and where you feel like you should be, in the flow, in the zone, and you've allowed it to just evolve. And like Mary Fran said, not be married to where it could or should or would go. But I also want to make sure that our listeners and our viewers, I want everybody to rewind. If we still say rewind, I don't know. I'm an 80s kid and we did rewind. If you go back and listen to Morissa saying about you didn't know what you were what other people thought you were supposed to do. You thought maybe I should go get the 95 because that's what people do, but maybe there's something else here and I do want to follow this. Like there was that moment of, gosh, everybody does the 9 to 5, but let me try this a different way. I think that's important. It wasn't like some big lightning bolt knocked you over and said, no, this is your path. And I think we do tend to get stuck in, like, I know for me, when I got divorced, I was like, no, this was supposed to be, get married, do all these things, have the big 50th anniversary, retire together, and Mary Fran always says when she found out her son was a heroin addict, they didn't look like the family that would have a heroin addict. And both of us got so stuck there, we couldn't move forward. As opposed to, I love that you say that you acknowledge that, you thought about it for a little while, and then realized it wasn't for you. And then you reset a lot quicker than me and Mary Fran.
Man, we're talking
I wish we would have met about 5 years ago.
Decades quicker.
So is that something that's part of your personality? Is it part of your family being into this? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, that you're a little more of a risk taker? How is that?
Or I would ask this question too. Is it generational? I mean, do you think that it's also could be a product of the times we live in and, where your generation is as opposed to mine?
Interesting.
Those are great questions. I have so many thoughts. I hope I remember them all. The first is, I grew up in my parents' mom and pop carpet shop. They now have several flooring stores, but so I knew that the entrepreneur way was a thing, but because of the way that my high school where, okay, everybody here is going to become doctors. And I'll tell you, out of that class of 32, I think 5 of them are medical doctors. And most of them are in technology now. So just, when you push it down somebody's throat so much, I think this generation does definitely, we can explore other options. Almost everybody's in technology now from that school, but in college and grad school even, I mean, my gosh, I went on job interviews just because my advisor said that's what I needed to do. I showed them my websites, I showed them my portfolios, I showed them all my great client reviews, and they still said, yeah, that's nice while you're a student, but you need something more sustainable and reliable. And I've also hired great freelancers for my own company. And I've had this talk with them where they're like, we love it here, but we want to go get 9 to 5. And I'm like, why? And, I get, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, what does a 9 to 5 offer you that I don't? I'm giving you everything. They're like, yeah, but I want to be in an office. And I actually, now with COVID, I think people are definitely coming around more. That's a conversation I had more, say, a year and a half ago, but I had that conversation so many times. So I do think a lot of people are brainwashed, but I do think that this generation now, my age and younger, I think are more prone because they grew up with the internet. So they're more prone to doing that kind of thing. Also, there are opportunities that weren't. Like my father started his floor covering store when he was in college. He didn't have the internet. He had, a small booth at like a little mall. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if he had the internet, it probably would have been different. So it's his generation telling my generation, hey, this freelance thing is sustainable, because they didn't have it when they were that age. So I think it's once, I think COVID is going to help. And I think that once we're moving through where that generation is seeing, oh, wait, you can have an online business, that's real. It's just going to keep where maybe advisors won't tell their students anymore, like, hey, you need a real job.
Yeah, that's refreshing. Who knows what everything's being redefined is basically what it comes down to. But you have to be open to that redefinition, because as you just said, you have your own people who I'm assuming they're freelancers, they're younger people. They have to be open to the fact that things can evolve. And it's so interesting because we live in a culture that values that, and yet we squash it. It doesn't, it's a completely different, the mindsets are in complete opposition. So there has to be some way to make that meet.
Yeah, I think it's because of, it's almost like the music industry or acting or anything else where they know how many people have failed. Like I have friends who wanted to be an artist more than anything, but people squashed it. They said, oh, so few people make it in the industry, don't go for it. I think it's just people that are worried because there's such a high failure rate. But, you know, I think with entrepreneurship, as long as you have a good plan and you work hard, you know, at least in my experience, that's how it's been. Just work hard, don't be afraid to think differently, and just go for it.
I love that. Don't be afraid to think differently. You know, when I started a nonprofit, well, it's 10 years ago, it's the 10th year anniversary. Now, you know, smarter than the average bear. I'm not going to lie. You know, I got a couple of brain cells, right? But I get into a vision research nonprofit. I have no business being in anything science, but my two boys are blind. So I started this patient organization that has a huge research component. And one of the, you know, ginormous organizations that has the monopoly on the entire vision research field, right? That is the old model of nonprofit said, oh my God, this little mom isn't going to make a dent. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, maybe I won't, but I'm not going to do it the traditional way. I started studying entrepreneurship, to your point of thinking differently. That's what I learned. If you just think about it differently, go differently. I had to go really far, really fast. And I'm like, well, I'm a Philly girl. I can talk fast. I can do all kinds of crazy things. So maybe this will work. And then lo and behold, he and I were invited to the same FDA meeting. Like we're now the same global impact, right? And I'm like, not so bad for a little mom. But that's the piece that you just gave me the words that I haven't been able to say for all of these years, is that you have to be willing to think differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to, like I always say, you have to look at your problem differently. Like when I looked at blindness as a problem, that's what I was getting was a problem. And instead of looking at it as an opportunity to do things a little differently. But then the next step of thinking about it and going about it in a different way. But now have you gotten pushback from people along the way? Like I know your advisors were like, you got to go get a real job. And have your parents always kind of supported it, or are they ever like, whoa, I don't know?
My father is the most supportive. He is my rock. If I ever have a question or anything, I always go to him. He has been, a person couldn't be more supportive. If anything, he doesn't push, but he reassures me if there's ever anything. And he gave me amazing advice when I first started, where he said, there's going to be a problem every single day. Just be ready for it, and it just comes with the territory. And he knows from being a business person for so long. And my mother is also incredible and incredibly supportive, but she is more she's not as much of a risk taker, so she's often the voice of reason. She's always supportive, but she's also that person who, you know, just will err on the side of caution. Like she encouraged me very strongly to take my LSATs when I was, you know, in all this right after I graduated college. She heavily encouraged me to take my LSATs just in case. So yeah. I did that. So that's her personality. So that's been great. As far as my parents' friends though, as far as they're concerned, I'm an unemployed bum. Like they don't get it at all. Yeah.
Unemployed bum.
Pretty much. I mean, like the mother throws in, oh, my daughter's a doctor. And then they go, oh, you know, what hospital? And she's like, no, literature. Like, oh, okay.
Oh, that kind of doctor.
A word doctor.
A word doctor. But, you know, one of the things that you talked about that you sent us when you sent us your info was the importance of a tribe to you. Mm-hmm. And everything that you just said, they were people who were not what we think of as our traditional tribe, but also very important in that infrastructure, in that tribe infrastructure. I mean, obviously you have to have the parents, the people who support you. You have to have the person who feeds your dreams. That's your dad. You have to have the person that goes, all right, but let's have a little bit of a reality check just in case. That's your mom. But the people that go, well, you're an unemployed bum, they're also part of the tribe. And they can be part of the tribe that kind of feeds you to go further. Kind of like, I mean, I always say anger and frustration, they're very undervalued emotions because they can be used to go, oh yeah, I'll show you what a bum I am.
Well, I can 100% agree with that. My mother's friends, when I was, I think 21 or 22, my mother was telling her, oh, my daughter just graduated from college. She's going for a master's. And she said, oh, that's nice. She still lives with you? Oh, well, okay. Well, I guess you'll be proud when she moves out. And I moved out like right after that because, that was a strong calling to me. Like, yeah, let's. So I purchased a home, and yeah, so they definitely the negativity definitely does inspire you to achieve more.
Yeah, it can light a fire. It really can light a fire. So I mean, I think that the negativity is going to be there. The important thing is, how are you going to use it? Because it can be used, and you can use it as fuel, and you clearly did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now wait a minute. I'm trying to stay focused and hear and retain, but I cannot wait any longer. Please tell me about this longest chain of bracelets.
Yeah. So I did it.
And now there's a musical interlude leading into that.
I don't know what they're doing over there. When I was in high school, actually, I'll go back. It's always been a dream to break a world record. Even as a kid, I made like
this was a contest thing for you, kind of.
Totally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote my book. My first book, the self-published one, was A Career in Contest. It was all about winning contests. So to promote that book, I thought, what's the ultimate way to promote it? That would be winning the ultimate contest, which to me was a Guinness World Record. So that's why I said when I wrote that book and published that first book, I didn't know the first thing about marketing, but I had that little instinct like, how are we going to promote this? So I did that through the world record.
Wow. So you just decided to make a bunch of bracelets?
Oh, well, okay. So the bracelets actually, when I was 11, I had Lyme disease and it caused like arthritis. So as part of my physical therapy, I would bead bracelets, and I get like obsessed with things. So I beaded thousands of bracelets.
I never would have guessed that about you.
Yeah. So I had like thousands of bracelets beaded from ages 12 to 16. And when I was looking for a world record to break, I saw longest chain of beads and I was like, oh, I can do that. But then I realized, holy cow, this bead chain is way too long. And then I found longest chain bracelets. And I'm like, perfect. I already have thousands of them. All I have to do is chain them. And I did. It took me 3 days to just chain all the bracelets that I made together. I had to fill out a ton of paperwork, send it to world record headquarters, film myself, get my principal and my local town newspaper editor to actually come to my house and look at it and be witnesses. And yeah, then that was official.
Oh my God, that is just what's so great about that story? Like, it's just phenomenal. But the fact that it started as therapy for your Lyme disease. So it's rooted in something really special. And then we could be very dangerous together. Because you take one little thing and make it into a ginormous thing. And I love that.
Yep.
But you know what? The thing that strikes me is that everything that you do, first of all, everything that you do and that you talk about, there is a joy about you. There's a spirit about you that is something that I think people don't recognize can be cultivated. And maybe it has its basis in, and this is kind of what I'm feeling, does it have its basis in curiosity?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I am definitely a lifelong learner. During my free time, I just really like to read, and I go on my Oculus, and that's been a really neat thing.
You're what?
Like, my Oculus, virtual reality.
Look, Mary Fran, you learned a new word today from a whole nother generation. She has no clue.
It's really neat. So it's like during COVID, I went to Italy last week where you just go and you're like walking around the lawn. Like, it's really neat. So you could do all these different things. And the best one is space. You can be in the spaceship and just looking around under the ocean. I watched Cirque du Soleil, 5 different Cirque du Soleil performances with the virtual reality on my head. It's been great.
I may have to wrap us up because I think we've lost Mary Fran.
I'm out. You two just continue this conversation.
Mary Fran's going to go watch her black and white TV in The Wizard of Oz. She doesn't understand what's happening in the world.
The Morse code and smoke signals.
Mary Fran just got a new iPhone. Welcome to that. And now she'll get Oculus and we will never see her again. She'll be
I got my father into Oculus. I got him one for Christmas 2 years ago. He is so obsessed. My mother like constantly is getting not upset, but like, why do you have to get him that stupid thing? He hasn't talked to me anymore. He's always on that thing. He just plays poker with his buddies all day, you know?
Oh my God, this has been so much fun. This is so great.
Oh my gosh. All right. So, so it is based in some level of curiosity. And now
Absolutely.
That's something that can be cultivated though. So that's something that we need to share with people, that this interest can be cultivated. It doesn't have to start in a certain place with watching Cirque du Soleil on an Oculus or whatever the word was.
You got it.
Look how hip you are.
For our people out there, for our tribe out there, you can cultivate this curiosity. You can cultivate this joy, and consequently that can lead to that discovering your brilliance and figuring out how you can use that in the world.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, so tell us now, because we got to know where we can find more about you. Tell us all where we can find more about you, because this has just been the most fun conversation. And about your business and about your work. We want to know about that too. So where can we find out more about that?
I'm on social media everywhere under my name, Morissa with an O, Schwartz, also with the name Dr. Rissy. And then I have my website, drrissyswriting.com. But really, I mean, if you type in Morissa Schwartz on any social media platform, I'm there, and you can just reach out to me about whatever specifically you're interested in.
Awesome. This has been super fun. And I want to make sure that folks hear this one point in two different ways. That I think it's crystal clear that everything we talk about with parents taking their hopes and dreams off of their kids and allowing them to channel their own brilliance is quite evident in the fact that your parents let that happen, even with all the other people chiming in that this wasn't a good path. And look where you are now. But also, for those that are listening that are of Mary Fran's generation, which is way further down
really old
line, no, for all of us, that you really listen to your own inner thoughts and inner brilliance, and let it happen without everyone else's image and outcome that they want for you. Let your own journey happen the way you want it to happen. So go back and listen to this episode when you're feeling like you have to follow roles that are traditional, when you're feeling pulled in a different direction, and let Dr. Rissy inspire you to go.
What's that through line that we have? Let go of what things should be, and you can see what they could be. And you really embodied that for us. So thank you for sharing that spirit and personifying that through line that we have, because you really did that for us today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. You can get all of our resources that are available to you on our brand spanking new website that we put together and launched on our 1-year anniversary. How about them apples? Go check it out at brilliantlyresilient.net, and we'll see you next time.